My name is Christopher Whitehead. I am the Assistant Dean of Academic Support and Development at New York University. This past fall, I took General Chemistry 1 with the undergraduate students. I attended all the lectures, I attended all the recitations, I attended the learning groups, I did the homework, I did the exams and the final. And I took this class as an experiment to prove a point. I am about as far from a science person as it's possible to be. I'm gonna read off the science courses I took as an undergraduate and the grade I got with it. Spring 2011, I took the natural environment, C-. Fall 2011, I took Gen Chem 1, C- in the class, B in the lab. Fall 2012, I took global environmental change, C-. In my senior year, spring 2014, I took nutrition in health. That's sciencey. I got a C. I have an extended history of not doing well in science courses. I took this class to prove that learning is a skill. That if you use proper learning strategies, that if you set up for yourself desirable difficulties to help you engage in effortful learning, that not only will you be able to learn the material, have an appreciation for it, and not only will that learning be durable long term, but you will also perform at the level that you want to perform at. Knowing what I know now and applying what I know now, the strategies, having the right mindset, you can achieve the performance and the learning. You don't have to be a science person to do it. You don't have to be a math person to do it. You don't have to be a writing person to do it. Spoiler alert, those things don't exist. I went from a C- in Gen Chem, and the grade I received from the professor, he sent it to me last week, was a B+. I received a B+ in the course. I didn't take the lab, so it's a B+ in just the lecture component of the course, which is lecture, recitation, homework, exams, etc. C- to B+. That's more than a full grade point jump. And all I did was use effortful learning strategies and have the right mindset. There are two goals I have for this video. I want to talk about all the strategies I used and review them, to talk about if I did them well or if I didn't do them well. The other thing I want to talk about is what I learned from this entire process. What are my takeaways? What could you use as a high school student or younger? What could you use as a current college student? What could you use as an adult or administrator to guide how you think about learning and education? How could you use this as a parent when you're thinking about what your children, how they're learning? And that's pretty much it. So let's get right to it. There are 5 main strategies that I talk to students about: retrieval practice, spaced repetition, interleaving, varied practice, and generation. Of those 5 strategies, the ones that I found I used most were spaced retrieval, which I'm combining spaced repetition and retrieval to save time. I used generation, and I used interleaving. There are 2 other relevant items that I think I should go over too, and those are the amount of time I spent studying on a week-to-week basis and general motivation. Those were pretty significant in this entire process. Spaced retrieval is a learning strategy where you practice recalling information from memory multiple times, spaced out over increasing intervals. You do this instead of cramming it all at once. So instead of studying right before the homework assignment is due or studying the week of the exam, spaced retrieval says what we're gonna do is we're gonna test ourselves over the course of the entire week or weeks leading up to the exam, but we're gonna space it out. There are gonna be some days where I do not study. Right? For me, I would phrase it like that for me because I was only in 1 class. If I were in 3 other classes, there would be some days where I would not touch Gen Chem 1, right? So for example, there were some days this semester where I studied on a Sunday, tested myself hard without looking at notes on a Sunday, and then gave myself Monday to kind of forget the material. Forgetting is important because effortful retrieval, that means when you're trying to recall something without looking at notes, without using AI as scaffolding, when you're trying to reach down and get to that memory, it strengthens the retrieval route when you're able to do that successfully. And what a lot of students don't understand is as well is even when your retrieval attempt is unsuccessful, learning is still strengthened. So that day of me not studying Gen Chem on Monday was beneficial to my learning, because when I came on Tuesday and I would be a little bit rusty and I wouldn't remember as much, I would still at sometimes remember the material that I studied the day before, right? I think I would give myself an A on spaced retrieval. Every time I studied, it was effortful. Every time I studied, it was really, really hard. We'll get to time spent studying in a minute, but when I did study, it was effortful. I used flashcards, I kind of used Anki. Building the flashcard was difficult for me though. Maybe for others it would have been better, but it was hard for me to find time to build the cards, to be honest. It was hard to find time to do that. I'll talk about why in a second, but it was hard for me to find time to do that. So what I just chose to do is I would take the homework assignments and I would start them very early and I'd just keep redoing them. I'd redo them as much as I could. I'd do a problem, I'd do a hard problem, I'd complete it, I'd get the right answer, I'd feel really good about that. But I would know in my head that I didn't truly understand the material, and I'd do that same problem 2 or 3 days later, right? So I would just space out when I did the practice problems that I was given, either on the sample exam, either in homework, or in the book. Interleaving is when you mix different topics or problem types while you study. You do this instead of practicing the same type of problem over and over and over. So for example, if we're doing chapter 6 and we're talking about, enthalpy, right? While I'm doing chapter 6 homework, I'm throwing in things from chapter 4. Precipitation reactions, something like that. Some kind of problem that I struggled with maybe on the first exam or just, in that chapter, and mixing it into my practice so that I'm switching up the types of problems I'm doing. You do this to develop discrimination on your exams. I would give myself an A for interleaving too. This was incredibly helpful for me on the second exam. There was a problem on the second exam that a lot of students got wrong because they didn't identify it as a limiting reagent problem. There was a problem that looked like a limiting reagent problem and wasn't. And then there was one that was a limiting reagent problem, and we didn't know which one we were going to get. Because I interleaved different types of limiting reagent problems, I feel that when the exam came and I saw the word problem and I read it, I was able to discriminate that it was in a limiting reagent problem and produce the answer that the test wanted me to produce. There were some students who didn't identify it as a limiting reagent problem, and they might have got it right if they had. That's just from misinterpreting the word problem and not being able to tell what the question is asking you. I would also say interleaving was the most challenging thing for me to incorporate. Interleaving doesn't feel like it works. Interleaving is challenging because it feels like you're being inefficient with your time. For example, if I'm doing chapter 6 homework and I just want to get chapter 6 homework done, it's really, it takes a disciplined brain to say, okay, I know this is going to help my learning, so let me throw in some chapter 5 homework problems that I already completed into the mix. But I do that, again, because I know that chapter 5 material is going to be important for me down the line. And I also know that it's going to help my brain. It's going to challenge my brain. It's going to make it more effortful. Anytime I felt like I was doing something that was too easy, I tried to make it a little bit more effortful. So I will say that. And I just got done reading a study that said students don't like interleaving. Students don't feel like mixing up the material works. They don't feel like it's efficient, but it is. It is, I promise you it is, and I feel that it benefited me, especially on that second exam. Generation is essentially trying to attempt a solution before being fully taught. I think the most important one was generation. Trying out those practice problems before being told the answer, before being taught the material, trying to teach myself the material first. That's essentially what generation is. Trying to teach yourself the material first. Trying to attempt a practice problem, struggling through a practice problem without referring to notes, without using ChatGPT, without the thirst of finding the right answer. Doing that primes the brain for learning and helps performance as well. Struggling to generate an answer makes your brain pay attention. It makes your brain remember the material better because you've struggled through it, because you got it wrong or got it right. Generation is one of the most powerful tools to learning. I give myself a B because I was not consistent doing this. On the weeks where I did the reading before lecture, I looked at the lecture notes and I read the chapter and I did a problem. Those weeks felt very good. I felt like I went to lecture and I was locked in for the full lecture from 8 a.m. to 9:15. I was locked in the entire way. I did that about half the time. So out of the 14-week semester, I might have done that 6 or 7 weeks. I felt like I understood the material quicker. I feel like I performed better on the exams. And I think this is true because the first 2 exams, I performed better than I did on the final. Spaced retrieval, interleaving, generation. Those are the 3 I used. I'll put in the description, I'll put a full list of things that I did so that I'm not just talking about it on camera and boring you with it. Those are the 3 main study strategies that I did. However, so this is what I'll say. I want to talk about time spent. And this part here, I think, is most important for anyone who is intending to go to college and for people who are in college. There are students who I've met with in the past who have said, Chris, I've studied for hours on end. I've studied for 6 hours straight. I've studied all night. I've done the same thing over and over and over. And I still don't perform well on the exam. I get C's and D's, but I'm putting a lot of effort. I care so much about, being a doctor or, getting an A on this math exam or computer science or social science, whatever it might be. And I'm still not doing well. They're putting in a lot of time and not getting what they want. And then they produce the narrative that I'm just not a science person. I must not be a math person because anyone putting this amount of time in, and then I go talk to my peers and they're putting in half the amount of time and they're getting way better grades. My brain must not be wired that way. Incorrect. In order to perform well, in order to learn the material, the learning strategies that I just articulated to you, spaced retrieval, generation, interleaving, require a lot of time. You don't want to think about how you can shortcut time, how you can study with less time. You want to know how to study the right way. You want to really challenge your brain, but you're gonna have to put time in. I don't think you need to put in all-nighters. I know you don't have to put in all-nighters, but your time for just one course, really does have to be significant. The recommended time when I was growing up was, and they might still say this now, for each credit hour, 2 to 3 hours of studying per week. 2 to 3 hours of studying per week per credit hour. Gen Chem 1 is 4 credit hours. That would be 8 to 12 hours per week that you should be studying just Gen Chem 1. Eight to 12 hours per week, just Gen Chem 1. To really know and understand the material. That requires a handle on time management. You really do need that time. You really do need that time, especially if you're coming into college with no strong background in science or no strong background in math. you really do need 8 to 12 hours. 8 is good, 12 is better. For me, I don't think I put in per week on average. I don't know that I put in more than 6 or 7. And I felt that. I mean, some weeks it had to be 5. Between 5 and 8, I think that's where I would go generally. Between 5 and 8, and 8's being generous, maybe 5 and 7. Some of you might say, oh, you're taking 1 class. Undergraduate students are taking 4. No, I would offer that I studied as much as or less than the other students in my course in terms of studying the Gen Chem material. I studied Gen Chem as much as or less than the students in my class, to my own detriment. Why? It was very apparent to me early on in this Gen Chem process that I was going to have to sacrifice time to do well in this course. I've done grad school while working full-time twice, and that wasn't really hard. It was hard, but it was something I thought I could handle. But the misstep was I did that when I didn't have a kid, or when my kid was was younger than he is now. I'm not taking this class for any real credit. This is not going to improve my GPA. Because I got a B plus, now my C minus is not going to be averaged out. I am doing this for the love of the game, right? So I was not willing to sacrifice the time that I would have needed to sacrifice to really, really do well in this course. And what is really, really well in this course? We were in line for the final exam. It was me and 3 other students, and we were just talking about how we felt about the exam. And I was telling them, and they shared the same feeling. I hope they did better than me on the final exam. I was articulating to them that I felt like I was just on the cusp of understanding. Every time I talk about enthalpy, thermodynamics, I feel like I'm really close to understanding it, but I don't have it yet. That's a red flag. That means I have not learned it. Whenever someone asks you a question about a particular content and your brain is saying, oh no, I know this, if you can't articulate it in a clear 2 sentences, you don't know what it is. You don't know. And I was realizing as I was standing in line for the final exam that, maybe I don't know as much about quantum chemistry as I thought I did. And I think that's because of the time. I studied really hard, and I think just studying really hard in the small amount of time that I did with a 10-year gap of undergrad was enough for me to get a B+. So that's great. I am proud of that. Yes. For you all, for college students, for high school students who do actually have more time than I do, if you put in this 8 to 12 hours a week and you use the right strategies, again, you'll learn the material, you'll strengthen your brain, you'll be better for it 10 years, 20 years from now, but you'll also perform, you'll get the grade that you want, right? It all comes together, but you have to put the time in. And if you don't have 8 to 12 hours per week, per course, you need to find out how to make that time, because that's important. That's important. That's almost a non-negotiable. I give myself a C, if that, on time spent. And that was a choice though. And that was a choice. It's hard for me on a Saturday when my son wants to play with me and I know I need to study. I begin to ask myself, wait, why am I doing this? Why am I taking away time from spending with my son? Or why am I leaving my son with my wife so I can go off and study and she has to follow, why am I being a poor husband or a poor father for a course that at the end of the day is, not necessarily going to, do anything for me outside of making me smarter. So that was hard for me to sacrifice that time. However, the time that I did use, because I knew I wasn't going to put in any more, I worked really, really hard in that confined time. Now, again, it varied 5 to 7 hours is probably where I was at. For you all, for students, it has to be closer to 8 to 12. You got to find that time, 8 to 12 hours. For those of you who have 3 credit courses, it could be more 3 credit courses. It could be more 6 to 9 hours per week. But if you're doing 4 credit courses, it's got to be around 8 to 12 for sure. I will say for motivation that by just wanting to do this, wanting to learn, wanting to show up, wanting to perform well, that was probably the most significant difference maker in the class. Even more, I would say, than the study strategies. Now, the study strategies were important, but the fact that I showed up at 7:30 every Tuesday and Thursday, but to try and sat in the front row and really took time out to do this and enjoyed it and had a lot of fun and laughed, and on exam days felt an adrenaline rush that I was excited to take the exam. That's not what students are feeling. Students are not feeling that. Students, when an exam day is coming up, they're feeling anxiety. They're feeling pressure. The only pressure I had was embarrassment. And deep down, I knew I wasn't going to embarrass myself because I trust the science. I trust the learning science. So I knew I was going to at least be in the B range in this. Students are dealing with anxiety. They're dealing with pressure from at home. They're dealing with pressure about jobs. Even in their first year, I had a student, when I said, hey, good luck on the exam, you'll do great. Student said back to me, yeah, well, you already have a job, so you don't have to worry about it. What? So I say that to say there's something to be said about students coming into college with some sort of habit system to help them navigate the storm that, college coursework will provide. They will provide a healthy, strong storm. They will provide some obstacles. They will provide some friction. And that's the point, right? That's the point. So that's the part of this experiment that I wasn't able to properly test because I didn't experience anxiety. I experienced joy and even in a weird way, pleasure through this entire time. I liked going to lecture. I liked studying. I might even keep up with the Gen Chem material, just because. But that's for the love of the game, man, and I love what learning has done to me as a 34-year-old man. Just taking this class and really leaning into the learning, I feel that my brain has rewired. I feel that I'm smarter. I feel that I'm more competent problem solver. What I learned is, and what I proved is, learning is a skill. Again, I am as far from a science person as it's possible to be. And I got a B+ after 10 years. And I only studied, on average, anywhere between 5 to 7 hours. I don't want to say less. I don't think it was less than 5 to 7 hours per week. Learning is a skill. You are in control of your own outcomes, especially your learning outcomes. You are in full control. You need the strategies, you need the time spent, and you need the mentality. You need a growth mindset. For lack of a better term, you do need a growth mindset. You need to believe that you are in full control of your outcomes. You can't just say it. You have to believe it. And when you get something wrong, when you make a mistake, you have to look for ways to make mistakes. You have to welcome mistakes. That is what learning is. You have to do it. If you're willing to do that, you are therefore willing to learn and perform. And I keep saying performance because I know students are obsessive about grades. I know that when some students look at a B+, they're going to say, oh, well, he just got a B+, he didn't get an A, right? But that would be missing the point. I went from C- to B+ after 10 years, and I didn't take the lab. Imagine what you could do coming right out of high school, having some sort of Gen Chem, some sort of math work fresh in your brain, and now having these rich strategies laid out before you. You can do this. When you invest in your brain, you're more resilient. When you invest in your brain, you're a better problem solver. When you invest in your brain, you're more confident. When you invest in your brain, you're better able to find peace. You're better able to chase success. College is not the only way to hone your brain. It's not the only way to effortfully learn. There is a bunch of different ways to do that. College is the place where it's the most concentrated. College is the place where you come with that being the sole purpose. I urge all of you to do more research on desirable difficulties. and figure out ways to make your learning more difficult, desirably difficult, so that you can leave college with a stronger, more honed, more polished brain than the one you have right now, than the one you came into college with. You can passively get through college. You can AI your way through college. You can cheat your way through college. You can sleep your way through college. I did that, right? You can go to college and not really leave with a higher quality brain. That's a fact. You can do that. But you can also choose to make things a little bit more difficult for yourself. You can choose to solve a problem without looking at the answer. You can choose to do the reading all the way through without running it through a chatbot, right? When you graduate, run it through the chatbot all you want. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If that's what you want to do. But for the purposes of improving your quality of brain, you're here to make things a little bit more difficult for yourself. This is my last YouTube video. In the near future, maybe I'll post something, a short, as I engage with students and have conversations with students. If there's something that's important that I feel like people should know, I will post that. Other than that, though, I enjoy doing this whole process, and I will see y'all around.